You are not God. Only He can create a man and woman. If you think you can, you are defying God's plan. The evil Dr. Frankenstein care about riches, not your mental health. Deep dive podcast show. Let's dive in.
All right. Are you ready to jump into a story that is causing quite a stir?
I'm ready.
We're going to be looking into the story about a former top aide for Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You know, AOC. He recently left the U.S. for Colombia.
Right.
And, you know, at first glance, it sounds pretty straightforward. Right. But then you realize this aide, Diego de la Vega, was an undocumented immigrant.
Yeah, that's the twist.
Yeah, it's a pretty big twist. So,
definitely adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about someone who was working for a prominent progressive politician, someone who's known for advocating for immigrants' rights, and he himself was undocumented. What do you think the implications of that are?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is whether or not AOC was aware of de la Vega's immigration status.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole thing comes from an article in the New York Post.
Right.
And it sparked a lot of discussions, you can imagine.
I cannot.
A lot of heated discussions, you know.
Yeah.
A commentator named Robbie Starbuck even tweeted about it.
Yeah.
Questioning not only AOC's awareness, but also how he was paid and whether taxes were filed correctly.
Right, right. Those are some pretty serious questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are legal questions with potentially big consequences.
So let's break down those potential legal ramifications.
Okay.
What kind of legal hot water could AOC or her campaign be in if it turns out she knowingly employed an undocumented immigrant?
Well, I mean, employing an undocumented immigrant is a violation of federal law. That's pretty clear.
Right.
Severity of the consequences. That can actually depend on the circumstances.
I see.
But employers can face some pretty hefty civil fines.
Okay.
And in some cases, they could even face criminal charges.
Whoa.
I mean, obviously, there's a huge difference between accidentally hiring someone who's using false documents and actually knowingly employing someone who's undocumented.
Right, right, of course. So there's this interesting irony here.
Yeah.
De la Vega left the U.S. for Colombia, right? He said he was frustrated with the lack of progress on immigration reform.
And he criticized the Biden administration's handling of immigration.
Yeah.
Which, you know, adds another layer to this.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
He worked for a progressive Democrat.
Right.
And he felt disillusioned with the party's approach to the very issue that directly affected his life.
That's quite a bit of irony there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it's a lot going on.
So how do you think this story kind of plays into the whole political landscape?
Well, I think for people who favor tighter immigration control, this is like handing them ammunition.
Yeah.
You know, it feeds into that narrative that Democrats aren't tough enough on immigration.
I see. So you think it kind of plays into existing stereotypes?
For sure. For sure. It reinforces the idea that they're not enforcing immigration laws like they should.
Right. But on the other hand, for people who support, you know, a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants,
right,
De la Vega's experience might make them feel like reform is even more urgent.
Yeah, definitely. It highlights the human cost of inaction, you know.
Definitely.
Like real people are being impacted while politicians debate.
Exactly.
It makes it much more real.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that behind all the political talk, there are real people's lives being affected.
Absolutely. Front and center.
Yeah. This story really shows that.
Definitely does.
So we've got some political intrigue here. There are potential legal problems and a personal story that's tied to the larger immigration debate. As we kind of go through this story, what stands out to you the most so far?
I'm really interested in digging into what De la Vega himself had to say about all of this.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, all right, let's do it.
It's really interesting how De la Vega's own words kind of fan the flames here. He didn't just leave quietly, you know. He made some pretty strong statements.
Oh, yeah. What did he say? Like, what were his reasons for leaving?
Well, that New York Post article, it says, he said, protections are going away regardless of who is in the White House. The strategy hasn't adapted to the modern era. Biden had a trifecta, the House, Senate, and White House, but dropped the ball.
Okay, so for anyone who's not up on all the political lingo, what does that mean, that trifecta thing?
Right. He's talking about the fact that during the first 2 years of Biden's presidency, the Democrats, they had control of both houses of Congress.
Right.
The House of Representatives and the Senate, and of course, presidency too. So that trifecta, it means they can pass laws without needing Republican support. Theoretically at least.
Ah, okay. So basically, De La Vega is saying even with all that power, the Democrats didn't get anything done on immigration reform, and he's frustrated.
Exactly. And it really gives more fuel to those who are already criticizing the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Especially those progressives who feel like Biden hasn't done enough to protect immigrants.
It also puts AOC in a tough spot, doesn't it? I mean, she's a big supporter of progressive immigration policies, but this whole situation with her aide could make people question her stance.
Yeah, definitely. If she knew about his immigration status, it could seem pretty hypocritical. And if she didn't know, well, that raises questions about her judgment and how she chooses her staff.
It opens her up to criticism from both sides, doesn't it?
For sure.
People who don't like her immigration policies will say she's not credible, and some of her own supporters might feel let down.
That's the thing about politics. It's messy.
Yeah.
Even when you're fighting for a good cause, things happen. Unexpected things. And the narrative gets complicated.
This really shows how hard it is to change anything about immigration. I mean, it's complex, it's a hot button issue, and it's personal for so many people. And De La Vega's story shows that even people who are working within the system, pushing for change, they can end up getting disillusioned.
It's not just about the politics either. Think about De La Vega. He came here as a kid, built a whole life here, worked hard, contributed, and even worked in Congress. And then he feels forced to leave, the place he calls home.
His story makes the whole immigration debate feel real. We're not talking about policies, we're talking about people, their lives, their hopes, their dreams. It's all on the line.
It's easy to forget that when you're caught up in the political arguments. But De La Vega's story, it reminds us what's really at stake, the human cost.
So we've looked at the political side, the possible legal trouble, and the personal impact. What does this all tell us about the bigger picture, about immigration in America? It's amazing how one story can get so many different reactions.
It really is.
This whole thing with AOC and her aide, it's like a Rorschach test for how people feel about immigration.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Everyone's looking at the same facts, but they see something different. They interpret it based on what they already believe.
Yeah.
It says a lot about their perspective.
It makes you think about the role of the media, too.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the New York Post broke this story, right?
Right.
And they lean conservative. So how do you think that affects the way people are seeing the story?
That's huge. The way a story is presented, the angle they take, it shapes how people understand it.
Yeah.
Think about it. Headlines, the words they use, even who they choose to quote. It all builds a narrative.
Yeah.
And the New York Post, well, they're going to emphasize things that their readers care about.
Right.
So maybe they'll focus on AOC being a hypocrite or how the laws were broken, stuff like that.
So it's more important than ever to be smart about what you read and watch.
Definitely.
You can't just take everything at face value. You got to know who's telling the story and what their agenda might be. Look at different sources, form your own opinion.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key, especially these days.
Yeah.
Information spreads so fast, and those algorithms online, they just feed you more of what you already think.
Yeah.
You got to break out of that bubble and look at other points of view. Challenge your own beliefs.
Okay, so we've gone through the facts of the case, the politics, the legal stuff, how the media is covering it. But what does it all mean? What's a big takeaway for our listeners?
When you boil it all down, it's a story about how immigration policy affects real people.
Yeah.
Diego de la Vega deciding to leave, his frustration with the lack of progress. It all shows just how tough it is for immigrants.
Yeah.
Even for those who have built a life here and contributed so much.
Right.
It reminds us that immigration, it's not just some political game. It's about real lives, families, hopes, and dreams. It's personal.
It also makes you wonder, is the system even fixable?
Yeah.
I mean, if someone like De La Vega, who worked in Congress and was fighting for change, felt like he had to give up and leave, what hope is there for anyone else?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there's an easy answer. But De La Vega's story definitely shows us how urgent this is.
Yeah.
We need a better approach to immigration, one that's more humane and makes sense. We have to figure out how to keep our borders secure, but also take care of the people who are just looking for a better life.
Yeah.
We got to address why people are leaving their homes in the first place and make it possible for them to come here legally and become part of our society.
It's a lot to tackle. It's going to take real conversations, empathy, and a willingness to compromise.
It will.
But, like we've seen in this deep dive, the stakes are high.
No doubt.
Real people are affected by every decision we make as a country. The choices we make now will have consequences for years to come.
This story, even though it's about one person and a specific situation, it shows us what's happening with immigration all over America.
It does.
It's complicated, there are challenges, and there are human stories that we don't often hear, but they're there.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll keep following this story and see where it goes. In the meantime, keep those brains working, ask the tough questions, and stay curious, folks.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family.